The Emilia Bassano Controversy, Deconstructing the Shakespeare, Authorship Debate in the Digital Age. The Prologue, a viral storm from a scholarly spark. On a seemingly ordinary day in the modern media cycle, a tremor ran through the interconnected worlds of literary scholarship, popular culture, and social media. The source was the announcement of a new book proposing a radical revision of the most hallowed canon in English literature, that the works attributed to William Shakespeare of Stratford-upon-Avon were, in fact, the creations of Emilia Bassano, later Emilia Lanier, a poet of Italian descent, described in the ensuing frenzy as a black Jewish woman. The claim, blending high-stakes literary, detective work with potent, contemporary identity politics, detonated in the digital public square, when figures like Elon Musk, the technologist king of the X platform, engaged, often with characteristically provocative brevity. The debate ceased to be confined to academic journals and lecture halls. It became a global conversation, a Rorschach test for our views on history, authority, identity, and the very mechanisms by which cultural legacy is forged and contested. This paper will undertake a comprehensive examination of this controversy. We will explore the historical figure of Emilia Bassano, the evidentiary architecture of the new theory, the entrenched landscape of the centuries-old Shakespeare authorship question, and the profound cultural and sociological forces that have propelled this particular hypothesis to viral prominence. It is an inquiry that reaches far beyond the question of who held the quill. It is a case study in how history is narrated, how genius is racialized and gendered, and how, in the 21st century, the search for a true Shakespeare mirrors our own turbulent quest for representation and legitimacy. 2. The Claimants, introducing the Stratford man and the Venetian courtier's daughter. To understand the weight of the challenge, one must first acknowledge the stature of the incumbent, William Shakespeare of Stratford, 1564-1616. The biographical skeleton is familiar, if frustratingly sparse. Born to a glover and local official in a prosperous market town, he married Anne Hathaway, fathered 3 children, and by the late 1580s was in London establishing himself as an actor, shareholder, and playwright. He amassed property in both Stratford and London, retired to Stratford and died there, leaving his second-best bed to his wife. His monument in Holy Trinity Church depicts him as a prosperous burgher, not a poet. The case for his authorship rests on contemporary attributions in print, the quarto titles, the first folio's direct dedication from his fellow actors Hemingers and Condell, laudatory poems from peers like Ben Jonson, who named him the Sweet Swan of Avon, and records of payment for his performances at court. Held by the vast majority of academic scholars is that this evidence, while circumstantial by modern standards, forms a coherent and contemporaneously uncontested chain of attribution. Emilia Bassano, 1569-1645. Her life story reads like a Tudor-era novel. Daughter of Baptiste Bassano, a Venetian musician in the court of Elizabeth I, and his common-law wife Margaret Johnson, she was orphaned young and placed in the household of Susan Bertie, the Countess of Kent, where she received an exceptional humanist education for a woman of her station. At 18, she became the mistress of the Queen's much older Lord Chamberlain, Henry Carey, Lord Hunsdon, the patron of Shakespeare's acting company. Notably, she was also part of the Venetian Jewish community of court musicians. While her personal religious practice is unclear, her heritage connected her to a marginalized, sophisticated culture. After a scandalous pregnancy, she was married off to another court musician, Alfonso Lanier. In 1611, she published Salve Deus Rex Judeorum, a volume of poetry that is fiercely feminist, theologically complex, and the first original book of poetry, published by a woman in England under her own name. She lived the rest of her life in relative obscurity, running a school and litigating for income from a mining patent. She died in poverty. For centuries she was a footnote, known primarily as a possible candidate for the Dark Lady of Shakespeare's Sonnets, a theory proposed by the scholar A.L. Rowse in 1973. 3. The New Theory, Architecture of a Revolution. The new book, let us call it The Emilia Hypothesis for the sake of this analysis, does not merely propose Bassano as a muse or collaborator. It posits her as the primary author. The argument is built on several interconnected pillars. 1. Motivation and secrecy. The theory hinges on the absolute social impossibility of a woman, particularly one of ambiguous racial and religious heritage, publishing secular plays for the public stage. Playwriting was a commercial, low-status trade, and for a woman attached to the aristocracy to engage in it would be scandalous and destructive. Therefore she needed a front, a straw man of unimpeachable masculinity and neutral social standing. William Shakespeare, an actor and businessman connected to her lover's company, was the perfect vessel. 2. Education and worldview. Proponents argue that the plays demonstrate a depth of learning in law, medicine, courtly etiquette, Italian literature, music, and classical philosophy that far exceeds what a grammar school boy from Stratford could plausibly possess. Bassano, educated in an aristocratic, humanist household and immersed in the polyglot, musical, and intellectually vibrant world of the Tudor court, is a better fit for this erudition. Her poetry reveals a similar command of theology, mythology, and a distinctly female, often subversive, perspective on power. 3. Linguistic and textual echoes. The book likely presents detailed textual analysis, arguing for parallels between Salve Deus Rex Judeorum
and the Shakespearean canon, shared rare vocabulary, similar syntactical structures, and thematic preoccupations with justice, gender transgression, and the plight of outsiders. The argument points to the play's profound empathy for complex, intelligent women, Portia, Rosalind, Viola, Cleopatra, and their searing critiques of patriarchal authority as evidence of a female authorial consciousness. 4. Biographical mapping. This is perhaps the most speculative pillar. It involves reading the plays and sonnets as encrypted autobiography. The anti-Semitism in The Merchant of Venice is reinterpreted as a critique from within a marginalized community, not a prejudice from without. The loss of a son in Hamlet or King John mirrors Bassano's own loss of her son, Henry. The Dark Lady sonnets become not about Bassano, but by her, expressing her own conflicted passions. Her relationship with the powerful Lord Hunsdon is seen as the key to understanding the courtly politics and insider knowledge of Love's Labour's Lost or A Midsummer Night's Dream. 5. The Black Jewish Woman identifier. This is the most politically and culturally charged aspect. The description black is used in the early modern sense of not white, often referring to Southern, European, or Mediterranean complexion. Portraits suggest a darker complexion. Her Jewish heritage, while likely nominal, connects her to a diaspora intellectual tradition. The theory thus reframes the Shakespearean oeuvre not as the universal product of a white English genius, but as the hybrid, cross-cultural, and oppositional work of a triple outsider, a woman, a person of color, and a member of a persecuted religion. For the wider field, the authorship question as cultural phenomenon. The Emilia hypothesis did not emerge in a vacuum. It is the latest and most culturally resonant entrant into the long-standing Shakespeare authorship question, which has been a fringe but persistent element of literary culture since the 19th century. The aristocratic challenge, 19th century. The original doubters, like Delia Bacon and later Sigmund Freud, could not reconcile the sublime works with the bourgeois facts of Stratford. Will's life, they proposed figures like Sir Francis Bacon or Edward de Vere. The 17th Earl of Oxford, men of high birth, university education, and court experience, This was fundamentally a class-based argument, reflecting a romantic belief that genius of such magnitude must be allied with noble breeding. The Oxfordian theory, 20th century. De Vere has become the most popular alternative, championed by numerous writers and even some notable actors and jurists. The case rests on perceived parallels between de Vere's life and the plays. His known literary talent and his extensive travels to Italy. Critics dismiss it as a biographical fallacy, arguing that imagination, not autobiography, is the playwright's tool. The Marlovian and group theories. Other candidates include the playwright Christopher Marlowe with a faked death scenario and theories of collaborative authorship, which have gained traction in mainstream scholarship. The New Oxford Shakespeare attributes several plays in part to other hands. The academic establishment has largely treated these theories as conspiracy theories, products of snobbery and a misunderstanding of Elizabethan collaborative theater and the nature of artistic genius. The response to the Emilia theory from this quarter has been swift and dismissive, citing a lack of direct evidence, the robustness of the traditional attribution, and the dangers of parallel hunting. V. The Digital Inferno. Musk, Memes, and the Politics of Identity. The unique firestorm around the Emilia hypothesis is a creation of the digital age. Its viral trajectory offers a masterclass in modern media dynamics. 1. The algorithm's appetite. The theory is perfectly engineered for virality. It combines a shocking revision of a cultural monument with the potent themes of race, gender, and hidden history. Headlines describing Shakespeare as a black Jewish woman are irresistible clickbait, guaranteed to generate shares, outrage, and passionate commentary across the ideological spectrum. Elon Musk as amplifier. When Musk engages, the story transcends literary circles. His tweets, whether skeptical, mocking, or merely curious, act as a massive signal boost to his millions of followers. His involvement pulls the debate into the broader culture war arena, where it becomes a proxy battle over wokeness, historical revisionism, and elite authority. Is this following the science of textual analysis or an attack on Western civilization? Musk's platform X thrives on such polemical binaries. The identity politics crucible, for many, especially those historically excluded from the Western canon. The theory is powerfully symbolic. The idea that the pinnacle of English literature might have been forged by a woman of color is a thrilling corrective to centuries of exclusion. It is seen as an act of reclamation. Conversely, for others, it feels like an ideologically driven assault on a shared cultural heritage, an attempt to discredit a white male genius. The debate often sheds more heat than light, with partisans arguing past each other from entrenched positions versus pop scholarship and authority. The controversy highlights the declining gatekeeping power of academic institutions. A theory can now achieve global reach through a popular book, a podcast, and social media, bypassing the slow, peer-reviewed channels of traditional scholarship. This democratizes debate but also risks privileging compelling narrative over evidentiary rigor. Phi. Evidentiary cross-examination. Strengths and profound weaknesses. A sober assessment requires weighing the hypothesis's appeals against its critical flaws. Strengths and appeals. Recovering a lost figure. It brilliantly rescues Emilia Bassano from obscurity, forcing a re-evaluation of her poetry and her place in literary history. This is an undeniable good. Explaining the knowledge problem, it offers a neat, if speculative, solution to the perennial question of how the playwright knew so much about court life, Italy, and specialized subjects. A coherent motive for secrecy. The social constraints on women provide a powerful reason for anonymity, more compelling than the aristocratic stigma of print argument for male nobles. Thematic resonance. The emphasis on strong, cross-dressing heroines and critiques of power does align with a proto-feminist perspective. Critical weaknesses. The total lack of direct evidence. There is not a single contemporary document, letter, or record that links Bassano to playwriting or suggests anyone doubted Shakespeare's authorship during his lifetime or for centuries after. The first folio, published 7 years after her death, is a monumental tribute to him by his closest colleagues. The immensity of the deception. The conspiracy would require the silent complicity of dozens, actors, rivals, printers, court officials over decades. It assumes Bassano could write for the male-dominated, collaborative, and physically demanding environment of the theater without any leak or hint. The nature of genius and research. The theory underestimates Shakespeare's genius for synthesis, observation, and imaginative absorption. It also underestimates the resources available in London's vibrant, print and intellectual culture. One did not need a university degree to be a voracious autodidact. The biographical fallacy. Reading the plays as direct reflections of the author's life is a reductive approach to art, and Shakespeare's empathy was his genius. He could channel the consciousness of kings, clowns, and murderers with equal conviction. Anachronistic framing, labeling Bassano a black Jewish woman as a primary identity imports modern, racial and religious categories onto a period where they operated very differently. While her heritage is significant, using it as the key to her authorial potential risks a presentist distortion. Pink's deeper currents. Why this theory? Why now? The Emilia hypothesis resonates because it speaks to profound contemporary anxieties and desires. 1. The crisis of authority. In an age of distrust towards institutions, academic, governmental, media, canonical figures like Shakespeare are naturally subject to reinterrogation. Conspiracy theories flourish where trust erodes. 2. The hunger for representation. As societies grapple with legacies of exclusion, there is a powerful desire to find hidden figures who redefine our cultural origins. The thought that the ultimate cultural trophy might be claimed for an underrepresented group is emotionally and politically potent. 3. The democratization of history. Social media has empowered public participation in historical debate. The people can now challenge the professors, creating a more chaotic but also more engaged historical discourse. 4. The persona versus the work. We live in an age obsessed with authorial biography and authenticity. The relatively blank slate of Shakespeare's life becomes a screen on which we project our own values and conflicts. The search for the true author is a search for an origin story that makes sense to us now. Fate, beyond binary, collaboration, influence, and a more complex model. Perhaps the most productive way forward is to escape the either-or trap. The radical secrecy theory may be untenable, but what if the truth lies in a more nuanced middle ground? What if Emilia Bassano, a brilliant, educated woman at the heart of the literary patronage network that included Shakespeare's company, was a conversation partner, an influence, or even a collaborator? Scholars like Dr. John Hudson have proposed she may have had a hand in plays like The Tempest or The Winter's Tale. Could she have been part of the intellectual coterie that discussed ideas, sources, and plots with the playwrights? Could lines, scenes, or characterizations bear her imprint? This model of a collaborative, networked creative environment where a woman of her talents could contribute without being the sole secret author is more historically plausible and still revolutionary. It elevates her from mistress muse to intellectual agent, challenging the model of solitary male genius without requiring a grand conspiracy. 9. The unanswered questions and the path forward. The controversy leaves us with pressing questions. How do we balance the democratic urge to question history with the disciplinary standards of evidence? Can we celebrate and center marginalized figures like Emilia Bassano without needing to dethrone others? What does our relentless search for the real author say about our inability to let the works stand on their own? How does social media, with its incentives for polarization, shape our engagement with complex historical debates? The path forward requires pluralism. It requires scholars to engage respectfully with public curiosity, not just dismiss it. It requires media to present nuanced explanations, not just incendiary headlines. It requires the public to embrace complexity over conspiracy. The study of Emilia Bassano should be intensified, her poetry analyzed, her life contextualized, her possible networks mapped. At the same time, the evidence for Shakespeare's authorship should be clearly and patiently explained, not merely asserted as dogma, epilogue, not an end, but a new chapter. The viral controversy over Emilia Bassano as Shakespeare is not a silly distraction. It is a significant cultural moment. It demonstrates that Shakespeare remains a vital, contested site of meaning. The plays have survived because they are endlessly adaptable. Now the story of their origin is being adapted for a new age. Whether one finds the hypothesis credible or fantastical, it has performed an invaluable service. It has forced a re-engagement with the Elizabethan world in all its complexity, a world of cross-class collaboration, of intellectual exchange, of hidden lives and public performances. It has introduced a remarkable woman, Emilia Bassano, to a global audience, and it has laid bare our contemporary preoccupations with identity, authority, and justice. In the end, the quest to unmask Shakespeare may be less about the past and more about ourselves, a reflection of our desire to find in the fountainhead of our culture a face that looks like our own, or like the diverse world we aspire to build. The plays, in their boundless humanity, already contain that multiplicity. Perhaps the ultimate lesson is that the genius of the Shakespearean canon, whoever its primary author was, lies precisely in its ability to contain and give voice to the Emilias, the Williams, the Kings, and the commoners all at once. The controversy hasn't diminished Shakespeare. It has proven yet again that his or her work remains powerfully, provocatively, and irresistibly alive.